We're going to cover website design process and then best practices for your website layout. And then we'll open it up for questions. So when we're looking at website design, it's definitely more than just the colors and the layout of the information. It's how your site works as well. Your website is extremely important today because this is the place where people are going to do research on you before they decide to engage with you for business purposes. A well-designed website is going to offer much more than just the aesthetics. It's going to help attract visitors. It's going to help people understand who you are, what your product offering is, the brand, what you believe in. So it's a lot more than just how it looks. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the web design process. Regardless if this is the first time that you're working on a website or you've done it 100 times, it's really important to understand the process. I'm not going to go super deep into it, but just to give you a high-level overview so that you're aware of what steps need to be involved. But before we do that, I want to share some of the language related to the website design process. So the layout is definitely the graphics, the visuals, any text, and how this information is organized on your site. Colors and fonts are extremely important because they can actually make or break the site. What's important with regards to both colors and fonts is how easy it is to read this information. Content is more than just the copy or the text. These are also the visuals that are displayed on your site. Your navigation or your menu is one of the most important elements, as this is basically the roadmap that tells people how to go from page to page and navigate through the different sections of your site. Multimedia is a combination of video or any audio elements. This can definitely enhance the user experience and help site visitors to stay on your site longer. And then what kind of activity or interactive steps do you want people to take? So this is important to help convert site visitors into potential customers. Making sure that these forms, newsletter signups are very easy to find and easy to use. When looking at the website design process, we want to start by building a plan. The more that we understand the purpose of the website, the better the end result is going to be at the end of the day. So who is your website for? Who's going to be visiting the site? The site's not for you, the business owner, to say, look at all these cool things we can do. The site is for the site visitor to help solve the problem that they're trying to get solved. So what is the goal of your site at the end of the day? Again, the better that you define the goal, what do you want the purpose of the site to be? Is it to educate and inform? Is it to sell? Is it to attract new potential clients? The better you understand that and have it clearly defined, that again, the better result you're going to have at the end of the day. You have to understand what are the key messages that you want to have conveyed on the site. And in addition to that, you have to build your site structure or your site map. So that visual on the right is your site map. You want to have this mapped out in advance of starting the design so that you know what types of pages you intend to have on the site. It also gives you direction for the content, which I'll cover in a little bit here. Your site map is going to help make it clear to how you organize the content, but also understand the overall user experience that you intend to have on the site. Some other things to be aware of in the planning stage is the domain name. If you already own the site, do you have access to the domain name? If not, you're going to have to start doing some research and find a domain name that is available, and I'd recommend purchasing that sooner than later in the process. When you're looking at your site, you want to figure out how are you going to build the site at the end of the day? Is it going to be on a content management system? Are you going to move into maybe a web-based structure such as Wix? Knowing where you're going to build your site is going to be extremely important into the planning process as well. And then last, you want to be aware of where is the site going to live, or what is the hosting environment. That definitely is going to play a factor in how you build your site and what kind of capabilities are going to be available. As far as the website design process goes, you're going to want to start with your color palette. So we typically like to look at about 4 or 5 options with about 5 colors per option. Now, definitely, you're probably going to have some branded rules with if you're an established entity already. But you want to identify some complementary colors that will help act as a strong call to action or really stand out and pop. In addition, you're going to want to have about 2 different fonts that are available. Usually you want your headline or heading fonts to be a little bit different than your body fonts. And I'll get a little bit more into some best practices around colors and fonts a little bit later. The next part of the design is to build what is referred to as a wireframe. So that image that's in the middle of these 3 images here is what we refer to as a wireframe. This is kind of like a blueprint for your website. This is basically mapping out what will go where on your site. So right here, you've got your navigation, then you've got that big hero image, and maybe there's some overlying text with a nice call to action button right away at the top. Then you're going to marry the colors and fonts to this mapped out wireframe and start playing with some of those options. You know, do you want all of your headings to be a certain color? What are the buttons going to look like? And you start building out how the rest of the site is going to come together. An extremely important part of the website design process, and often the part that I find takes the longest amount of time, is the website content. First, your content is ultimately going to engage the readers. It's going to drive them to take some sort of action, which is going to help you to fulfill the goal that you've mapped out for your site. The content is the writing itself, but it's also how it's presented. So that's the fonts and the structure of the information. The other very important factor that content plays is it is an extremely important role with regards to your search engine optimization efforts. So make sure that you've done your homework on what key phrases you should be focusing on while preparing your content. We have a website content template that we share with any of our clients, and I'm sharing it with you. If you just go to the bit.ly URL that I've plugged in here, bit.ly /web content template. This is a Google Doc, and it's got a couple examples of a site structure in there, and then you can use that, make a copy of this document. You can download it for yourself. But what's important here is somewhat of a checklist for best practices. And then each page that you've identified you have to create content for, there's a structure that is listed on this left-hand side here. First and foremost, what is the page title? Page title is extremely important because, again, it plays a factor in your search engine optimization. And it's also telling that potential site visitor or reader what this page is about. Then your meta description is just as important as it plays a factor in both the SEO aspect and that site visitor aspect. And then you want to look at what is the purpose of this page, or what is the value proposition, and make sure you have a really compelling statement here. And then you want to look at the body copy, make sure it's focused heavily on one specific type of content or piece of information that this page is about, and build all that copy in there. If you're really focusing on SEO efforts, then I would say target about 800 words per page. If it's more just like a landing page, it's guiding people, a navigational page, then you don't have to worry too much about the word count. The other element that is often forgotten about when you start looking at content is what are the visuals that are going to support the text that's on that page or the body copy. So are there images that are necessary for a page? Are you using any video, any audio? What elements visually need to be added to those specific pages? So again, bit.ly web content template available for all of you to reference as a framework as you start working on the content of your site. And then the last element is the actual development of the site. So again, are you going to build it on a content management system, which is what I would highly recommend. There's a ton of options that are out there. Makes it easy for you to update the information without actually having to know the code of the site. And there's a lot of level of security involved in that. There are a lot of DIY platforms out there. As I mentioned earlier, Wix is another one. So then you don't have to worry too much about the development side of things, but you still need to implement how it's going to look and then the copy and the site structure overall. You want to create your style sheets, and you can do this basically in any platform that you're using. And basically you're specifying the rules that you mapped out with regards to colors and fonts and headings earlier on. So you could say, for example, all headings on my site are going to be an Arial font, they're going to be green, and they're always going to be the size 24 font. And that way, when you use headings anywhere on your site, you've defined the rules, and it's going to be creating a consistent look and feel throughout your site. Next, you want to test and verify that the links that you're using are actually working. Test the site over and over and over again, especially if you're building a site, you've got dummy content in there just to fill it up. You want to make sure you've removed all of that. You want to make sure that any images that you've used for placement, you actually have the rights to use those images. So definitely test multiple times and try to get a number of different sets of eyeballs on the site to test it before you officially launch it. All right, so now let's talk about some best practices for website design. I want you to think about your website as a billboard, not necessarily from the sense that there should not be, it's static content. More so think about the experience and the purpose of a billboard. With a billboard, you have 7 seconds to capture someone's attention. Now, if you think about someone that's going to Google, they've got a challenge that they're trying to solve, they're typing in their phrase, and then they click on a site, but then they're not happy or satisfied with the information that they see on that page, so they're hitting the back button. So there's 3 specific questions that we ask everyone that we work with that's going to make sure that we are indeed capturing someone's attention, so that that person that clicks on that site doesn't end up hitting the back button. The first question is, can you solve my problem? All right, so I went to Google because I had a challenge that I was searching for. I clicked on the link that was recommended to me in the search results page, but now I'm not seeing that this is actually going to help me solve the problem. So you have to make it very clear and obvious what it is that you're able to do to help support whatever it is that they were searching for. The next question to keep their attention is, what proof do you have that you can do this? Okay, so yes, you can help me solve this problem. You just said this right here, but how do I know that you can actually do that? So what we refer to this is the trust box. And what you want to display here are maybe testimonials. Do you have any media exposure that you can say, you know, as seen in? Do you have any logos of brands or companies that you've worked with? Do you have any organizations that you're affiliated with that are recognized as leading organizations within your industry? These are all really good items to display in your trust box. The last question then is, what do you want me to do next? Now that you've said, yes, I can solve your problem, I have proof that I can do this, how do I, as a site visitor, engage you to do business? So that's your call to action. You want to make it very easy and minimize any uncertainty on how someone can proceed to get in contact with you, buy your product, sign up for your newsletter, whatever it is that you want that action to be. All right, so now we're going to get into some fun design topics here. The phrase above the fold has been around for many, many, many years. It actually originated with the newspaper, where, as you can see on the left, newspaper was folded in half, and then at the places that it's sold, the newsstands, you needed something really compelling to encourage people to pick it up and buy it. So that's your strong, powerful headline, that's really attractive visuals, and that concept carries over to your website. So above the fold is basically everything that you see immediately upon visiting your site without having to scroll. If you're scrolling down to see that content, that's considered below the fold content. So you want to make sure that your above the fold information, for the most part, is answering these questions right away. Because again, if someone is coming to your site and not seeing this information, they don't know how to engage with you, they don't have proof that you can solve their problem, and that you can actually solve the problem, then they're going to leave. So you want to make sure it's clean and easy for them to know that you can help them with whatever it is that they're looking for. You want a nice, short, impactful headline. You want to consider some bright colored buttons to help make that call to action very easy. Next, your navigation menu, first and foremost, should be above the fold. It should not be below the fold by any means. You want to make it very easy for your site visitors to navigate your site. You should consider 7 or less navigation menu items. Here is a great example of less is more. Also, what's really important is to have very easy to read font for your navigation. You can definitely see the difference between these two visuals, the one on top, very easy to read font, just a couple navigation items versus the crowded scripted font on the bottom. A topic that we discuss often is drop-down menus and what are the best practices with that. I think it's going to depend on your site and how complex the information and architecture is. I'm a fan of drop-down menus. I've read a lot of differences of opinions from different designers and developers as to the overall user experience of the drop-down menu. I think it's good to minimize the clicks, how deep someone has to click to get to the content. So the more pages you have, I think the better the chances that you should consider leveraging a drop-down menu. Going back to color, as we talked about early on in the design process, you want to make sure that you have a strong color palette that's not sending, you want to make sure you're sending the right message and not the wrong message. You want to make sure that your color aligns with your target audience. For example, if you're selling auto parts on your website, pastel colors probably aren't the right choice for you. You want to make sure you have a nice dynamic color scheme with some contrasting colors, as I talked about. So you can see the two concepts here. The one on the right really pops by having the contrasting, the blocked out call to action, the nice blue button that says save now to move forward versus this flatter palette on the left. Not a lot of pop that's happening there, and makes it a little bit more challenging to decide what is it that you want me to do next. The next element is the font choices of your typography on the site. They can actually have a huge impact on the overall user experience. You want to make sure that readability is simple and clear for your site visitors. If they are unable to read your content, they're not going to stay on your site. You want to minimize the use of decorative fonts for your body copy. As you can see, the example on the bottom, extremely difficult to read. It is strenuous on the eyes, and therefore, again, you're going to lose the interest of that potential site visitor. Sans serif and serif fonts for body copy are probably your best options. Headline copy should stand out from body copy. There's a number of resources available for fonts. Definitely a fan of Google Fonts, fonts.google.com. These are free fonts. The other thing that's good to know is that these are all web-safe fonts. So sometimes we've had clients that want to use their branded fonts on their website, which is, you can do that. You can upload certain fonts to your site. The challenge that you face at that time is that just because you have the font on your site, the person that's viewing the site and their browser, they may not have that font, and it could ultimately distort the overall look and experience that they're having on that site. So you want to make sure that you're using web-safe fonts. If you have a subscription to Adobe, They have Typekit is this tool, fonts.adobe.com, that you have access to as well. And I just recommend going in and playing with different words and your messaging and figure out what are the best fonts that you want to use. As far as the overall layout, keeping it simple is definitely going to reap better rewards for you. You definitely don't want too much activity. Your goal with your content should be framing it in a nice, elegant way to make it understandable to that site visitor. What is the next step that you want them to take? So that image on the right, your eye just kind of scatters all over the place and you're really uncertain, what is the next step that I should take here? Where that layout on the left makes it very clear. You have option A, B, or C. You have very nice, clean text, and then that call to action button at the bottom. You want to definitely keep it simple layout with text fields that are easy to read and make it easy for that site visitor to know this is the next step I need to take while I'm visiting your site. The mobile experience is something that is extremely important to pay attention to. Depending on your industry and what your offer is, you may have more visitors to your site from a mobile device than you do from a desktop. That being said, some designers will take the approach, if you have a higher search or a higher experience on mobile, to actually design your site mobile first. So you're thinking about that mobile user experience before you're looking at what is the experience on a desktop device. Again, it really depends on your industry and who your audience is. The other thing that's really important with regards to mobile is Google. If your site is not a positive mobile experience, then if someone is searching for your offering on a mobile device, Google will not display your site in the search results. So their goal is to make sure that they're providing the best information possible. So make sure that the experience on your mobile device for your website is super easy to use. Scrolling needs to be vertical, not left to right. I've definitely visited some sites on a mobile where you're scrolling left to right. You want to make sure the buttons are super easy to access. And oftentimes what's going to happen is you may end up actually hiding images and just displaying the content. You want to focus on the text size, make sure the size is easy to read and that the image sizes aren't taking up the majority of the space. Another really important element with regards to site design and overall user experience is the speed of the site. Page load times are one of the biggest reasons that visitors actually get frustrated and will leave your site. And page speed is definitely a factor that Google looks at as well. Again, their mission is to provide the best experience and results based on this inquiry that was typed into their search engine. So the faster your site loads and the easier the experience overall, the better chances you're going to show up in Google's search results. One way to minimize the speed or the load time of the site is to properly optimize your images. I'm sure we've all visited pages or websites where the content loads right away, but then you see this image kind of crawling, where that was the wrong way to upload the image. You want to make sure that the image size is set to the actual size that you want it to be displayed at. You can upload a huge image file and actually within the code of the site say, I only want this to be, 500 pixels wide. It's still going to load that full image size and then it's rendering it down. That's making it really heavy and slowing it down. So only upload that image at that 500 pixel wide that you actually want it at. If you've got any logos or icons that you're using on your site, make sure that you are using a transparent background versus having a white background. Again, that's going to help with the load speed as well. Another thing to look at from load speed is the overall length of the page. So oftentimes, we're looking at 800 words or so, like I said, but you don't need to have a super long page or have that content spread out. So you can tighten up some of that white space and make it easier for the page to load faster by having less information on it. Another factor, more so on the user experience side, is to make sure that you're using high quality images on your site. They should be crisp, high resolution images are definitely going to increase the overall credibility. If you're selling a product, the quality of your image is going to make or break that sale. It is worth investing in either quality photography equipment or hiring a photographer to take high quality images on your site. Do not steal images off of somebody else's site, and make sure that you're aware again of that image size that you have displayed on your site. I'd say more times than not, you're going to want a horizontal image versus the vertical images on your site. There are tons of resources for free or paid stock photography. But before you go into the stock photography route, I'd highly recommend utilizing your own photography over stock photography. Especially as of late, Google has made or started looking at the visuals on your site, and you want to differentiate yourself a little bit more. If you're using the same images that 100 other websites are using, that's going to be something that they will potentially devalue the weight of your site versus you using your own photography. So products, that's easy. If it's a service, then take pictures of, go out and take some pictures of people sitting around a table, shaking hands, whatever it is that you need to do versus just using the stock photography. But if that is your only option, Pexels.com, Unsplash.com, those are some free sources for stock photography. In addition, you can subscribe to places such as Shutterstock.com or Getty Images. All right, and that is what I have for you with regards to the website design process and best practices for your website. I will open it up for questions.